Hello, I'm Li Hao. So it's the Svelte question time. If you have any questions, I have answers for you. So today, the question for today is props being passed by reference or by value? So what do you think? Is props being when you pass a variable to props, is it being passed by reference or by value? So if you know JavaScript, when you call a function and you pass arguments to a function, whether the variable that you're passing into the function is by reference or by value, that depends on what kind of data you're passing. If you're passing an array to a function as an argument, and you try to mutate the array inside the function, you realize that on the outside, when you return from the function, the array is mutated. Right, so that means that you are passing the array by reference to a function. So they are pointing from the outside or inside the function, they are pointing to the same array. Mutating the array will have effect on both the variable outside or variable inside because they are pointing to the same array. Right, but if you're passing numbers, primitives like numbers, strings, boolean, and you change the variable value inside the function, you realize that it won't change the value from the outside, because when you call this, you're passing the primitive variables by value instead of by reference. So the same question but applies to props. Whether are we passing the props by reference or by value? Well, the answer, it depends, and it's the same as how you would think about functions. Right? It depends on the data type. If you're passing store, if you're passing arrays, if you're passing objects, then you're passing by reference. But if you're passing primitives like numbers, boolean, strings, then you're passing by values. And let's take a look at why this matters and some of the cases that may trip you. And let's take a look at why that happens. Right? Let's take a look at this example over here. Over here, I have prepared a component, an array that takes in an array, and I created an array 1, 2, 3. I'm going to pass this array to a component over here. So array is equal to array. I can write this as a shorthand as this. They are the same, right? I'm passing an array to this component. Over here in the components, I show this. I use an each to list out all the items in the array, and I try to border the list with a blue border so that you notice that this is actually within the component. And outside, I try to do the same thing, but I use a red border to wrap it. Right. So now you see that the array itself is blue and it's red from the outside. Okay. So now we're going to see whether we have said that we are going to pass this array as reference, meaning both inside the component and outside the component are actually referencing the same array. So if we're going to try to change the array from inside, probably we'll see that the array should be updated from the outside as well. Right? So here I'm going to I have a button called make changes, but I haven't done anything yet. So here I'm going to mutate the array. I'm going to say array.push 4. If I try to click it, nothing happens because of how reactivity works in Svelte. Right? If you try to call this function, Svelte has no idea you're actually trying to mutate this array. Right? Because array can be any variables, can be just a class that has this method called push but does nothing. Right? So to inform Svelte that array has actually changed when you click this, when you do this, is you try to call array equals to array. Right? So when you do assignments, Svelte will notice that, okay, you are assigning something to this array. So I'm going to pay an extra notice, and I'll allow, I will try to do something if this array actually changes, right? So here, I do this and I click, you notice that this array is now 4 items, right? But we're doing mutation and we have told you that we are actually passing by reference. But why is this array not changed, right? Why is this not updated, right? It should be the same array, right? Well, it is the same. So to prove you that they are the same, I'm gonna come here to have a button. Do something. Right, and on this button I'm gonna on click. And on click I'm gonna just print out whatever the value of the array is. Right, so when I click make changes, the array now should be 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Fair enough. When I click do something, you see that the array value, it is 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 items. 4 items, but then you don't see this shown on the screen. It's not updated on the screen. Why? Because over here, because of how reactivity works. Over here, we notify that, okay, hey, array has changes, but this array is like a state within your components, right? You just tell that within this component, the array has changed. But over here, this component has no way to see that the array has changed. So a few ways that you can do. First is you can bind the props, because this array is at the same time a props for the component as well as a state within this component, right? So as a props, if you do this binding, you're actually doing a two-way binding, meaning if you change it from outside here, it will notify and update it from within the component. And if you try to update this array variable from within a component, it will update this variable that you're trying to bind to, right? So bind array means you're binding the array props to the variable called array, right? What we written previously is like a shorthand of this. You don't have to write that. You can just do it this way, right? Now, if you do it this way, make changes, you realize that this changes as well, because when you try to update this array, it notifies here that the state array has changed. Then we update this over here. This variable has changed as well, right? Of course, it's still referencing to the same array. It's just that the content has changed, and we just tell that, hey, just pay notice of the content of this array. It has changed. Try to take a notice and see if you need to render something, right? So here you try to able to, although it's mutating the array, but you still don't get a reactivity kicks in if you're not doing a binding correctly, right? So let's revert this, because I want to show you something else. So if you revert this, and if instead we're not mutating the array, but we are trying to do a assigning the array to a new array, for example, like this. Okay, we don't need this. We don't need this assignment now because this itself is an assignment already, and you didn't tell Svelte that, hey, array has changed. Right? If I do this, we're actually assigning a new reference, new array to this variable. Right? Meaning if you try to do this and click make changes, and you take notice of here when I click do something, it still show 1, 2, 3. Right? Because the reference of this array outside here is still pointing to the old array, which is 1, 2, 3. And over here, you're creating a new array, 1, 2, 3, 4, and assigning it to the internal to this array over here. Right? So now you see that it's like in function, although you're passing in the same reference to a variable, but if you try to reassign this variable to something else, then the variable outside will not pointing to the same array. It will still pointing to the old array, and it's not the same new array as what you're pointing inside this function or this component in this scenario. Right? So again, if you want to have these changes propagated out, you would have to do bind array over here. And now you try, same thing happens, right? So to propagate changes from within a component to outside, right? To propagate changes in a state as props as well, you have to do a two-way binding so that this will not only changes on this array will get affected to these props in this component, as well as changes making to this states or these props will affect from within the component will affect the outside variable, this array variable as well. Right? So question again, does Svelte props pass by value or by reference? And the answer is it depends. If it's passing arrays, objects or other complex objects is being passed by reference. If you're passing primitives like string, numbers, booleans, and etc., then it will be passed by value. So hope you learned something so far. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below. And as always, click here, click like if you like this video, and click subscribe so that you get notified when the next one is out. So see ya, bye bye.